Shana Tova. I'd like to start with something funny. A young Jewish man goes to see his psychiatrist. Doctor, I had the strangest dream last night. I saw my mother, but when she turned around to look at me, I noticed that she had your face. And you can imagine, I found this very disturbing. In fact, I woke up immediately and couldn't get back to sleep. I just lay there in bed waiting for morning to come. Then, as soon as I saw the sun rise, I got up, drank a Coke, and came right over here for my appointment. I thought you could help me explain the meaning of this strange dream. The psychiatrist was silent for a full minute before responding, "A Coke? That's what you had for breakfast?" I want to take this moment to repent for my first sin of the new year and apologize for mentioning breakfast just hours into our fast. We've all sounded, maybe, a little bit like a Jewish mother when speaking about our virtual High Holy Day services, haven't we? The internet? That's how you're going to celebrate Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? You're going to watch it on a screen? What kind of person does such a thing? All kidding aside, for many, these high holy days feel incomplete. We are so close and yet still so far. For many, there is profound emptiness, a lonely feeling of not being able to connect to prayer the way we normally would by sitting in a sanctuary and singing together. The majesty, the grandeur, the awe, a sense of spirituality that comes from connecting with people praying together. To help reconcile these feelings, I'd like to share a story. In 2014, while I was still living in Miami, I traveled with a group of 200 high school students, Jewish professionals, and Holocaust survivors, first to Poland and then to Israel, on a trip called March of the Living, a trip that takes teens and adults to visit the concentration camps and Jewish sites in Poland and then celebrate Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut in Israel. I remember clearly as we stood on the grounds of Auschwitz, marching victoriously, triumphantly from Auschwitz I to Auschwitz II. After a week in Poland connecting with our past, the group flew to Israel to mark Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, and celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Day of Independence. The morning of Yom HaAtzmaut, I was asked to lead a morning minyan, a prayer service for 200 students, Jewish professionals, and 3 Holocaust survivors. We huddled in a hotel conference room meant to accommodate 75. We were packed in. Minutes before we were scheduled to begin our service, the power in the hotel went down with no generator to back it up. It was winter. It was cold, and now it was dark. I made the decision that we would not be able to pray and announced that we would instead postpone our service and recite Ma'ariv, the evening service, later in the day. At that moment, a hand latched onto my arm. The firm grip startled me, and I quickly turned around to find Sam, the 80-year-old Holocaust survivor, clinging to my arm. "No, no," he said, "this is not right." "Let me tell you something," he said. His voice settled. It was tired from 2 weeks of traveling. "Marcos," he started, "I stood naked, cold, and afraid in the dark of night and in the dead of winter. I stood there waiting for them to kill me, and do you know what I did?" I was unable to answer. I simply shook my head. "I prayed," he said. "I prayed and I prayed and I prayed." And then he began to sing. Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, his voice raising in intensity. Sing it with me, he demanded. Shema Yisrael. The intensity from this man's soul was more than I could bear, and we both began to cry. Soon the room was filled with 200 voices singing the words of the Shema. Sam was right. His message is something I carry with me when I think about the structure of prayer and when I teach our religious school children about the concept of prayer. And Sam's message to me rings so true today as I stand before you in an empty sanctuary and as you watch from your homes. Together, we must pray. It is our obligation, regardless of where we are or the comfort level we have. Thank God. Thank God we have our homes to keep us safe, warm, and protected. Thank God we have food to eat. Thank God we have water to drink, TVs, computers, and phones to be able to connect us to each other. Now, 7 years after this incident with Sam, his message offers profound parallels to the circumstance we find ourselves in today. His character reveals a person who is unburdened by the metaphorical mask we all wear. You see, long before COVID-19, before the physical mask that covers our face and hides everything but our eyes, we humans developed a mechanism for coping with emotions, for coping with self-doubt, for coping with a sense of insignificance, for coping with our problems. Psychologists and sociologists who study human patterns of behavior indicate that people, especially in this country, disguise themselves to protect the very thing that keeps us alive, our hearts. Psychologist Leon Seltzer, in his piece entitled "The Power to be Vulnerable," writes, "Most of us feel a certain shame about divulging our dependencies. After all, as adults, it is almost always considered a virtue to be autonomous and self-reliant, whereas the mere suggestion of neediness is generally associated with being weak." How often do people ask us, "How are you?" And we respond, "Fine, how are you?" Right there, we put on a mask. How often do we find ourselves biting our tongues, wanting to empathize with someone else who has shared with us a particular problem, not wanting to reveal that we too are experiencing or have experienced something similar? Right there, we put on a mask. We put on our mask the instant we perceive vulnerability in ourselves, the moment we recognize self-doubt, the second we have to confront our emotions, we put on the mask. In writing this sermon, I was reminded of the song "The Stranger" by Billy Joel, who sings, "Well, we all have a face that we hide away forever, and we take them out and show ourselves when everyone has gone. Some are satin, some are steel, some are silk, and some are leather. They're the faces of a stranger, but we love to try them on." The Jewish response to this notion of hiding our true selves is compelling. Our tradition, from its stages of infancy, instructs us to confront our emotions, to be open and honest with ourselves. In fact, much of what these high holy days are about, specifically Yom Kippur, is the idea that we are to do what is called a cheshbon hanefesh, which means an accounting of our souls. To take a look in the mirror, pull down the mask, and see what lies behind it. In Genesis chapter 4, when the world is still so new, we learn of the conflict between two brothers, Cain and Abel, ending in murder. God immediately instructs Cain to confront his emotions as we read, "Ve'el Cain ve'el minchato lo sha'a Vaychar leKain me'od vayiflu fanav. But Cain and his offering he paid no heed. Cain was much distressed, and his face fell. And God said to Cain, "Why are you distressed? Why is your face fallen? Surely if you do it right, there is uplift. But if you do not, then sin will couch at your door. It will urge you forward." This concept is uniquely profound and written with so much foresight. It underscores the importance of dealing with our emotions. In Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, we read, Hillel and Shammai received the oral tradition, and Hillel used to say, "Be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving mankind and drawing them close to your Torah." Pirkei Avot speaks of world peace, but of inner peace as well. To pursue peace and achieve peace, we must first make peace with ourselves. We must first conquer the challenges we create for ourselves, and in no uncertain terms, our tradition commands us to remove our masks, to lift the barriers from in front of our eyes, to challenge societal norms that often encourage us to create a facade. The pandemic that has plagued our country and indeed the entire world has pushed us to the limit. We've seen the physical and psychological effects that this virus has caused, and yet in the same breath, we have witnessed the ambition of the human spirit, the extraordinary response to an extraordinary problem. People revealing themselves, giving every ounce of energy they have. People who, when asked, "How are you?" have the courage to respond, "I am not okay." Today I want to suggest that it is okay to be not okay. Take a moment and think about what this means for you, what this means for your family. Think about yourself or the people you love who need to be asked sincerely, "How are you?" Look in the mirror and ask yourself the question, "How are you?" and be prepared to answer honestly. Laugh, cry, get angry. There is no typical response. There is no right way and there is no wrong way to answer this question. The only thing that matters is the openness with which we approach it. How are you? Sometimes there are no answers. Sometimes we need to look around and say, "My God, how did this happen?" And then we renew, we rejuvenate, we re-energize our spirit. Yom Kippur is a reminder to us that as a Jewish people we have suffered. As citizens of the world, we feel pain, anguish, and remorse over matters completely out of our control. Yom Kippur instructs us to pray for a better tomorrow and renew our hope. Hope as an aspiration, hope as a call to action, hope as a renewed commitment to our faith and the teachings of our ancestors who demanded that we pursue justice, act with loving kindness, and teach our children the ways of the world. The last being the most important, teaching our children and teaching them well. Perhaps you remember the Crosby, Stills, and Nash song, "Teach Your Children Well." They sang, "You who are on the road must have a code that you can live by, and so become yourself, because the past is just a goodbye. Teach your children well, their father's hell did slowly go by." We have a code to live by. We've been given that by our Creator. And so, as the song suggests, we must become ourselves. We must become ourselves again and again and again. Year after year after year, we use this day, Yom Kippur, to become ourselves, to return us to the essence of our souls, and to teach our children the importance of following the code for their sake, for our sake, and for our future. When we were first instructed to go into lockdown, Joanna and I felt a sense of hopelessness for our children, Isaac and Robert. How would we make it normal for them? How would we give them the human interaction that young children crave? How would we provide the structure that young children need to thrive? Simple things like going to the grocery store, showing them fruits and vegetables, going to a music class, and of course, coming to shul to absorb the music and the prayers. We still struggle with it. And it's tough not being able to hold Isaac during Adon Olam. Or to see Robert, who is now 1 year old, shake his little tushy side to side during our musical Friday night service. But we have been so encouraged watching parents teach their children well, watching parents create miracles for their children. And of course, we've all had to learn how to manage and measure our happiness differently. But at the end of the day, when we recite the Shema with our children, we know deep down inside that those words and those memories we are creating will serve as a lasting reminder to our children to preserve that which is most important: our family, our friends, and our faith. So today, on this Yom Kippur, let us pray that we be given the opportunity to rediscover ourselves. Let us ask for the courage to pledge our full hearts to our family and friends and to reveal what we usually keep hidden. Our wish on this most sacred day is that we be afforded the opportunity to show our true selves and to see what is behind the mask. You who are on the road must have a code that you can live by and teach your children well. Their father's hell did slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they picks, the one they'll know by. Don't you ever ask them why. If they told you, you will cry. So just look at them and sigh and know they love you. Shana Tova.